But the actual property systems used in ancient civilizations can be difficult to fully understand without detailed textual descriptions. It has been suggested that studies of property systems in ancient states rely almost exclusively on textual data. Property is the subject of several recent methodological papers by archaeologists, but these writings serve mainly to confirm that the ability of archaeologists to reconstruct property relations or systems of property is quite limited without written information. Once we get past the Greeks and the Romans, we can also see that quite independently of these philosophical systems of land ownership were other land ownerships which were also being developed either at the same time or even before. So if we go back some 13,000 years or so before the Romans, even before the Greeks, we can see that there was also a Christian philosophy being developed based upon the Old Testament, if you like, of the Bible. And guidance was being sought from the Bible in order to determine what is the right nature of being. And so we can go back to a thing called the Law of Moses, for example. And I'm going to quote from the Old Testament, and it says, in relation to property, "And the Lord spake unto Moses in Mount Sinai, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When ye come into the land which I gave you, then shall the land keep a Sabbath unto the Lord. 6 years thou shalt sow thy field, and 6 years thou shalt prune thy vineyard, and gather in the fruit thereof. But in the 7th year shall be a Sabbath of rest unto the land, a Sabbath for the Lord. Thou shalt neither sow nor field, nor prune thy vineyard. That which groweth of its own accord of the harvest thou shalt not reap, neither gather the grapes of the vine undressed, for it is a year of rest unto the land. And the Sabbath of the land shall be meat for you, for thee and for thy servant, and for thy maid, and for thy hired servant, and for thy stranger that sojourneth with thee, and for thy cattle, and for thy beasts that are in the land, shall all the increase thereof be meat." We can see that there's a real struggle to determine how land should be used. There is a struggle to understand what is the right way to use land and what is the wrong way to use land. There's this ongoing struggle, particularly in the early days of determination of what property is, of how it relates to society and how society relates to land. What is the right thing to do? What would God want us to do? And you see the same sort of philosophy in much Islamic land law as well. Not that I'm an expert on Islamic land law any more than I am a Christian, I suppose. But there's this ongoing debate that philosophers have as to how we should develop land. Do we have land simply for everyone, so common property for everyone? Should we have it all privately owned, or is there some sort of blend in between? And this has been an ongoing fight. Have a look around your suburb. It's not all private property. Some of it is parkland, for example. Some of it is roads. Some of it is schools, national parks. We don't see all land in our modern context being either common property, all common property, or all private property. We have this sort of mix in between. And we determined through our growth as a society that is the determination that we need. We need to have some common property. We need to have some private property. The roads we drive on are necessary. If we don't have those roads, how are we going to get around? If we don't have parks, where are the kids going to play? If we don't have schools, where are the children going to be educated? So common property is important. Private property is important. And how these two interact and the proportions thereof have been an ongoing issue for philosophers in general. So, in various societies, the individual, the community, land and spirituality became intermixed. And this is still looking at the law of Moses in particular, and even going back to some of the Greek and the Roman philosophers who had regard to either a Christian God or to the gods of their time. Prior to and separate from the Greeks and the Romans, Mosaic land law, this is the law of Moses, were developed and based upon that law of Moses in the Hebrew Bible. This law interconnected land with the spiritual guide along with the individual and community. So we have this sort of three-way relationship. We have spiritual guide or God, we have the individual, and we also have community. The general timber of the writings by Moses was that the ultimate owner of all land is God, who alienates its use proportionally to his children, subject to a code of rules. These property rules therefore derive their legitimacy from the rule of God, which is subsequently enshrined in the law of the land. This code of rules includes a Sabbath year every 7th year, when the ground would be allowed to lie undisturbed and fallow, and also a Jubilee year when all debts on land were extinguished. Isn't that an interesting aspect? After all, the development of 6 years on the 7th year, and debts were extinguished. Under Mosaic land law, land could be sold for the remaining number of years in the inter-Jubilee period, so that's the period remaining until the 7th year. However, ownership reverted back to the original owner in the Jubilee year with no cost. Imagine having that in modern society today. But there again, that was the rules of the land at the time. Any purchase would therefore be the equivalent of the present value of future income for a defined period and would be considered to be a partial interest in land. So from such laws as Mosaic law, as law of Moses, we begin to see fragmentation of rights of ownership, partial interests. This intervention of the spiritual owner of the Mosaic land could be considered to have the impact of retaining the ownership of the land within the original family group in perpetuity. Further, the impact of the Jubilee year meant that the mortgages were limited to the extent of the period remaining until the next such Jubilee year. A limitation, therefore, was automatically placed upon the family regarding borrowing capacity and ability to overcommit. It also contributed to the importance of the family as inalienable owner of the land as opposed to the individual. To quote Leviticus 25:23, "The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine, for you are strangers and sojourners with me." Similarly, the Islamic world retains a strong connection between spirituality and land. And again, I quote, "Private property rights are promoted, but the ultimate ownership of God over land is assumed and requires all rights to be exercised within the Islamic legal and ethical framework with a redistributive ethos." To continue on, the concept of dual ownership, human being and God as dual owners of land, is one of the special features of the Islamic doctrine of economics. Islam protects and endorses the personal right to own what one may freely gain through legitimate means. It is a sacred right. Yet human ownership is tempered by the understanding that everything in the last analysis belongs to God. What appears to be ownership is in fact a matter of trusteeship, whereby we have temporary authority to handle and benefit from property. So in general, this strong spiritual bond in relation to land continues in the Muslim world to this day, albeit with local variations and colonial influences.